maybe this is a foolish thing to say because it just feels this way because we're talking about people from the school where we work, or we're talking about people from the community in which we live. But it does seem that people from Teesdale, a relatively small place, go on to have a really big impact in many different spheres of society, in many different professions, in many different areas of the economy. And maybe lots of people from lots of communities feel that way about their community. But it just seems to me that for such a relatively small place, Teesdale certainly does punch above its weight in terms of people going from this area, leaving this region, or staying in this region and doing important and interesting things. And that is certainly the case for my guest today. My name is Simon Henderson. I am Head of History and Sixth Form at Teesdale School, and this is episode 4 of Made in Teesdale.
Made in Teesdale.
And we actually sat there one night watching John Wayne's stagecoach film projected onto the wall while looking down at the scene below.
It is absolutely fascinating seeing inner city London children dropped into the middle of a working farm.
I have very fond memories of growing up in Teesdale. I mean, living in the countryside and having, loads of fresh air, loads of space to play.
It really is the case that if you come from County Durham, and in my case have lived in southwest London for 40 years, but County Durham's still what I call home.
Made in Teesdale.
Today I am talking to Anisha Harris, who left the school in 2012, went on to study chemical engineering, and is now working for a major global company that is shaping the future of sustainable energy. But don't take my word for it. Let's talk to Anisha. So, hello Anisha, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Now, I'm talking to you you're in Bahrain at the moment, is that right?
I am, yes. I've escaped the winter COVID madness for slightly calmer parts.
And it's a slightly warmer temperatures there. We've been enjoying a lot of snow here, not so much in Bahrain.
Yeah, no. Fortunately for me, who is not a fan of the cold, there is not much snow here, or any, in fact.
So, Bahrain, a long way from Teesdale. Talk to me about growing up in Teesdale, where you lived, and some memories of that experience.
Yeah, sure. I think my life now is quite different from what it was growing up. So I actually grew up in Bowes, which I'm sure many of you know is a very small village just outside Barnard Castle. About 150 people lived there, so you knew everyone. You could run around the streets, or the two streets that there were, with your friends in the evenings after school, which was really nice. You had a lot of freedom. Your parents didn't worry about where you were. Everyone's doors was always unlocked. It was a really safe environment to be in. And I think the longer I've been away from Bowes and Teesdale, the more you realise how lucky you were. So I live in London now. So for me now, I love the countryside. When I was younger, I craved being in the city, and I do love living in the city, but now I really appreciate the beauty of living in the countryside.
How do you find, apart from the sort of physical environment, you talked about in Bowes, obviously everybody knows everybody. How do you find the sort of social element of living in a big city in terms of the impersonal nature of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very different. You're a nobody, which in some ways I quite like. But everything has its pros and cons. And you can be sitting on the tube, and I became one of those people that would be surprised when someone was trying to speak to me, which is the most stereotypical London thing you could possibly do. Be shocked that someone is trying to make conversation.
Yes, you get a little bit more conversation in Bowes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So talk to me about, you left Teesdale School in 2012. So talk to me about some memories of Teesdale School.
Yeah, so I mean, gosh, it feels like quite a long time ago now. I mean, Teesdale, it was, a really fun place to be. I had some amazing friends, some amazing teachers, and I mean, one of my biggest memories through my whole time at Teesdale was the kind of the musical drama side of things. I think Teesdale had such a strong performing arts roots, and every year we did a big show. I was in various singing groups, learned playing violin, and then just more widely in the Teesdale area, there was so much going on. So that's really, I think, my fondest memories of being in Teesdale at that time.
And you went off to study at university in London. What did you study, and why did you choose to study that?
Yeah, so I went to Imperial College in London to study chemical engineering, which, I never thought that would be what I would end up doing. And for me, it was very much a in some ways ruling things out. I was trying to work out what I did like, what I didn't like. And I think it got to probably the summer that I finished my GCSEs that I realised that actually I really liked maths and science. And I think, I don't know whether it was not necessarily like the cool things to like. It definitely wasn't the common thing to like. So maybe that was why it took me so long to realise. And then when I was looking at maths and science, and I kind of thought, okay, well, I don't want to do a pure science. That's not interesting enough for me. So that kind of led me to engineering, because it's very applied. And also you learn so many skills that you can apply in anything. It might sound like a vocational degree, but it's absolutely not, as I will prove, as I am definitely not an engineer now. So yeah, chemical engineering combined the subjects that I enjoyed at school in a very applied way. And I saw the potential for like the opportunities that it could open up into the things that you could do, because it's, endless opportunities, really.
Interesting, because I remember that you had one of your ambitions when you were younger was that you possibly wanted to be in a film, and you wanted to be in a film with Hugh Jackman. I seem to remember that you wanted him to be the leading actor in any film that you were in. And you talked about your love for like performing arts, and on the surface of it, it seems like engineering and sort of maths and science and the sort of the definitive nature of that, this equals this, and this is a scientific fact. That seems quite removed from something which is much more creative and much more fluid, which would be performing arts. How do you sort of understand your own mentality? Is that two different parts of your personality, or are you able to use some of the creativity that you possess in your scientific pursuits?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be able to bring creativity into whatever you do. And in my work, primarily, at simple level, we're trying to find solutions for governments, for companies, kind of associations to fight climate change through sustainable energy. And through that, you have to think creatively, because there's not a one size fits all. So I definitely think, growing up with such a strong performing arts background can help in the way that you think. And it definitely brings a different side of how you think to as you say, the very logical X plus Y equals Z kind of thing.
So talk to me about, you're working at the moment for a company called E4 Tech. That's all about sustainable energy. Talk to me about a project that you're working on at the moment, and what the aim of that project is, and what that involves you doing on a daily basis.
Sure. Let me just think about one that I am allowed to talk about. Actually, I'll tell you about one that I did recently, which I know is very public. So it was basically looking at the feasibility of a sustainable aviation fuel competition for the Department for Transport. So the Department for Transport have in the past run a number of competitions for technology developers who are developing technologies to produce biofuels, so fuels produced from oils, from waste, from forestry, And basically the competition is to help with the financial burden of trying to establish new technologies. So last year we were doing one which was looking at the feasibility of sustainable aviation, which is a kind of, oddly enough, a growing trend in a world where aviation is not growing per se. So we did this piece of work, and I got to do some coding, which I don't typically do in my job, but I kind of found a question that could be solved through a little piece of code, which I did on Python. So that's not something that I learned at university. It's something that I kind of wanted to do. So I was like, okay, this is a good opportunity to try it out. And yeah, I mean, and if you've seen Boris Johnson's 10-point plan, the government are actually launching a sustainable aviation fuel competition. And that's very much based on the foundations of the work that we did for the DFT last year. And that's really what I love about my work, and I think it's particularly the government-related projects that you can really see the impact of what you're doing is having.
Yeah, it must be really exciting that you work on something. It sounds like you work on lots of top secret projects because you couldn't tell us about them, and then this like gets unveiled publicly, and you can think, oh, I worked on that. That's particularly satisfying, I would imagine. And how do you think, you're talking about sustainable aviation? You are in Bahrain, so presumably you've used some aviation to get there, unless you had a rather long walk or a long journey by another means of transport. How do you think, and this is a pretty tough question, how do you think the pandemic's going to affect longer term people's attitudes towards sustainable energy and use of different fuels?
Yeah, I mean, really looking at the positives that have come out of a really pretty tough year for everyone, there does seem to be a real focus on sustainable energy and a green recovery, not just in the UK, but in all sorts of countries, which is really encouraging. And I think people have had the time to kind of reflect on their lives, what's going on in the world, and are willing to kind of make choices that might improve things. So, we talk about flying. At the end of the day, I think that when the world can, people will. People love going on holiday. Yeah. I certainly love going on holiday. And I know in myself that that's not something I could sacrifice. But, it's looking at ways to make that greener. So whether that's the fuel that is going into the planes or carbon offsets, which, whether that's the right solution or not, we don't know. But, being more aware of the decisions that you're making and the things that you're buying, I guess.
Yeah. And this is a based on a stereotype that hopefully has been challenged and is being challenged. But I'm imagining that when you went to Imperial College to do chemical engineering, that there were more men than women on your course. And I'm also imagining that in the line of work that you do, there are more men than women. How have you dealt with that reality, and what sort of problems, if any, have you encountered in that relation?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. And to be honest, it started even before I got to university. In my maths and physics classes, I was one of few girls, or the only girl in some instances. So, it was a reality that I was very aware of before even going to university. My course was about 70-30 boys to girls, so it's not a great statistic. But actually, as engineering courses go, chemical engineering were one of the better ones. Some of the others, so mechanical engineering, civil engineering, their stats were much worse. So I guess from that perspective, I was fortunate, and the women that I was with are all, everyone's very inspiring. So I don't think I ever really felt uncomfortable at the fact that there weren't that many girls. I was uncomfortable in the fact that there weren't many girls from the perspective that it meant that people weren't going into it, but not that it was kind of affecting my ability to do something. And as you say, in work it is the same, maybe to a lesser extent. but I've certainly been to events where, you know, I walk in and I am the only female, or particularly the only young female, in a room, and that it can be intimidating, definitely. But I think you just have to kind of know that you're there because you wanted to be and because you are able to be, and don't let it affect you, really.
Yeah, but trust your talent regardless of your gender. So for girls who might be listening to this, young women who are interested in mathsy, sciencey stuff, but kind of maybe feel a bit put off by that it's not seen as the thing for girls or women to do, what would your advice be to them?
I mean, I think, you know, if it's what you enjoy, you just have to, and it's hard to do this, but you just have to go for it and not listen to what people say. You know, most of my friends at school did humanities subjects. I really was one of very few that went on to do science subjects. So you will feel a bit of an oddball, but at the end of the day, it opens up so many opportunities. STEM subjects are so rewarding in so many ways. And yeah, I mean, just go for it. Like the opportunities are endless. And I mean, that's definitely something that I do want to see more of. I feel like girls, there is no reason that a girl shouldn't go into STEM. There's no barrier that should exist. So yeah, you should just believe in yourself and go for it.
Do you feel it in any way that when you've come to apply for jobs or internships and stuff like that, that you're almost, you know, companies want to embrace the fact that there are more women in STEM now, and so think, oh, well, she's really, really talented and she's a girl, so that's a bonus?
Yeah, I'm sure there is a bit of bias going on there, which is, you know, it's favouring me, so I'm not going to complain. But yeah, I mean, you have to get picked on your merit, not solely from the fact that you're a girl. But it's definitely, companies are definitely very, very aware of the biases that are going on, and definitely, you know, making big actions to try and combat that and increase the number of women within the business.
Yeah. So you're working from home, which is which currently is in Bahrain, your parents, but it's often in London. When all this is over, no doubt you'll be going back to the office. What would you like to be doing in 5-10 years' time? What's the Nisha Harris career plan?
The Anisha Harris has never really been able to think that far ahead, if I'm completely honest. You know, I toy with different ideas all the time. Part of me would like to move to Australia. Continuing in this field of work, I know that this is the field that I want to stay in for the foreseeable future, but where that takes me, I'm not quite sure. But yes, potentially a move to Australia could be on the horizons in the next few years.
Apart from the lovely weather, beaches, and various other things that might be a pull towards Australia, what is it about Australia that makes you want to go there?
Do you know, a big thing for me is family. So most of my family are in New Zealand and Australia. So growing up in Teesdale, we were an awfully long way away from them. So I think it would be really nice to be able to live close to family for at least a period of time and be able to enjoy all those things that a lot of people take for granted. Although I think this year a lot of people are much more aware of.
Yeah, I think one of the things about lockdown, you know, is that even people who maybe live 20-30 miles away from their extended family don't see them face to face as much as they did before. Now, you're someone who lived in Teesdale. I know a lot of your family on your mother's side is New Zealand. You've got a brother back in Leeds. You've got dad working in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. You've been all over the place. What advice would you give to people in terms of how to sort of keep connected with their family and kind of get that emotional support from a family in a virtual way? Because you've sort of had to do that throughout most of your life, whether there's never mind coronavirus, that's kind of how you've existed. What advice would you give people in relation to that?
Gosh, yeah, that's a good question, actually. And as you say, I really have grown up with that. We were actually watching some baby videos the other week, which was me on the phone or on like a web camera to my grandparents in New Zealand, and that was, in 1998 or something.
Yeah.
So I've kind of always been in this tech sphere, I guess. But I think that's really important. Like, now it's so much easier. Everyone has, you can go on your smartphone and you can immediately be looking at your mum or your gran or your aunt or whoever it might be. And I think that's really important. It's the face-to-face. Like, it's not the face-to-face that you get if you're actually together, but it's a lot more meaningful connection than a text message or just a phone call, I think. So I think that's really important. And it's just finding the time, if people are all busy at different times, it's just scheduling time to be able to connect to your family and however that might be.
And on a similar note, you told me that you started this job that you're currently doing for E4 Tech in September of 2019, and then you've been working from home since March. So you've actually currently been doing more of your job from home than in the office. A lot of students dealing at the moment, and their parents, with remote learning and learning from home. What advice would you give people as to how to manage that when your home becomes your office and vice versa?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really, really difficult, and life at the moment can feel quite monotonous. So I think it's important to have a schedule that allows you control, firstly, because there's a lot of things that are very out of our control at the moment, but also that accounts for doing things that are not just sitting at your desk or wherever you might be, your dining room table, listening to your teachers or on the phone to your colleagues. For me, doing some sort of movement, exercise, even if it's just like a short walk, just doing something before I actually start my day makes a world of difference for me. But it's, it's finding what works for you. Maybe it's at lunchtime going out for a little stroll or in the evening, but it's just having that time to move your body, I think, is really, really important. And also just not getting frustrated if you have a bad day. Like, I think bad days at the moment, they're bound to happen. It's a difficult time for everyone, and you have to acknowledge that you're not going to be super productive every day, and just take it on the chin and move on to the next day.
Yep, good advice. So in terms of downtime and trying to relax a little bit when you've been working, what could you offer us in terms of either a book and or a film and or an album recommendation for people to explore during lockdown?
Okay. Yeah, so I actually read a lot last year, which I did really enjoy. It was a really nice thing to get back into. And the last book that I read of the year was called Homegoing by Ya Jassi. I don't know if you've heard it. It's a book that's basically following the the descendants of two half sisters that were born in what is now Ghana. So like one side of the family kind of stays in Ghana and the other side is sold into the slave trade and ends up in America. So it's just each chapter is from the perspective of a different generation, and it moves through, and it's really interesting. And cliche, but yeah, Black Lives Matter was a huge thing last year, and so I actually made a really conscious effort to start reading books by Black authors, and particularly Black female authors, and this is one such example that I would really highly recommend.
Good recommendation. Good stuff. Well, it's been an absolute delight, Nisha. Thank you for giving up your time to speak to us for the Made in Teesdale podcast. Take care, and hopefully you will get the opportunity soon to fly back to London, and then you might also be able to sit in an actual office.
Yes, well, fingers crossed. But thank you very, very much for having me.
You're very welcome. So, from Bose to Bahrain and many places in between, there is a young woman who was made in Teesdale, who is making her mark in the world, doing some exciting, interesting, and important things, and we are very proud of her. She also gives some very good advice, just about giving yourself a break if you have a hard day during lockdown, if you don't quite achieve the things that you set out to do. Don't beat yourself up. Tomorrow's another day. It's another opportunity. Just be kind to yourself. So, comes to the end of this episode of Made in Teesdale. If you have a story that you would like to share with our listeners, then get in touch. If you know someone who has an interesting story that you think would be good for this podcast, then also get in touch. Until next time, please stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.